I've been given the nod. You want me to talk in public? You want me to share my ideas and my thoughts with you all here? Do you know how scary that is right now? What if I fall over? What if this sick feeling that I have starts coming out? What if I forget what I'm going to say? What if you all think I'm an idiot? What if people actually just walk out? What if people fall asleep? What if I could help in the next 30 minutes to minimize some of those thoughts, to help you with a structure, and to give you some tips along the way that I've learned that helps me to stand here today and actually do this for you? That could be a 30 minutes well spent. So good afternoon, I'm Jenny Muttlewar. I'm Head of Learning and Development here at Sumo. And often people say, what is learning and development? And I scratch my head a little bit and I go, yeah, what is learning and development? I've really kind of thought about this, and I think for me, learning and development is about creating environments and opportunities and facilitating and designing spaces and workshops and presentations and areas to really allow upskilling and growth within the mind to create a better tomorrow. And that can be creating and designing a workshop. That can be creating and designing an SDC event and content. That can be thinking about coaching, mentoring. It can be creating and designing a presentation that creates some thoughts that can be taken away, that encapsulates an imagination to help create a better tomorrow. But I wasn't always like this, I wasn't the kid at the front of the class, like I've got some ideas, pick me, pick me, pick me. Wasn't me. I was the one at the back of the class. I was the one, I didn't want anybody to ask me a question. If I could just get through the day and get home, that was a day that I'd done well. And I remember one time that one of my teachers thought it would be a great idea to get everybody in the class to stand up one at a time. They would ask them a question, they would answer, and then they'd sit down. And I watched as one person stood up, they gave their answer, and they sat down. And the next person stood up, they gave their answer, and they sat down. And I started to feel this tingling in my feet of dread. And then it started coming up my calves, coming up my legs, into my stomach, and I could feel it until I was pounding in my chest when it got to 3 before me. And then I stood up. And I got asked the question and I froze. I didn't even hear the question. I was just I'm the girl that sits at the back of the class. You're not supposed to ask me anything. I'm supposed to hide all day and then I can just go home. And I was so grateful to my friend Jenny Bradley, who's sitting next to me, and she pushed a piece of paper with the answer on it, and I looked down with such relief. I was able to give the answer, I was able to sit down, and I was able to get through my day not having to do that again. And this all changed when I was about 15, and a different teacher invited me to come to an event, and she said, if you can't, there's a sort of an open event, it was to the whole class. If you go to this speaking event and you deliver a presentation, you are likely to get a good grade in English in this part of it. And I was pretty rubbish at English, so I thought I could do with all the help I can get. So I said, yeah, okay, this sounds like a good idea, I'm going to do this. So I had to think about, okay, I'm 15, what am I, something that I'm really passionate about that I'm going to deliver a presentation on, because I'm going to have to write something and all the rest of it. So of course I came up with Barbie. And I wrote this presentation around the perils of Barbie and the dangerous social constructs that creates for young women. And I spent this time really thinking about what that really meant, and I wrote this presentation, and this English teacher helped me with this. And as we started to get towards the event, that same dread started in my feet, and that same dread started up my legs and in my stomach, but it was much bigger than it had ever been before. And it got to a point where I wasn't sleeping. I felt so sick. I thought, what am I doing to myself? No, this is just ridiculous. I can't do this. And my dad said to me, what, you're just going to quit? He knew what he was doing. I didn't like what I was about to do, but I wasn't going to quit. So I went to the event. And as I sat there, I was listening to all these other people, and they talked with such ease and such confidence. And there were some talks that really resonated, and I was like, is that the topic or is that the presenter? And what could I learn from that? How could I be more like that so that the next time I was having to do something, I wouldn't feel this same dread? And at that point in time, it sparked a curiosity in me that has lasted until today. In that moment, what was it about those people? What was it about those topics that stuck with me? And I started to look at this a little bit more closely. I started to take a look at comedians and the stories that they would create. Where was it? Why was I laughing at some and why wasn't I laughing at others? Their body language. What was going on that really resonated with me? Great talks that we all know. What was the cadence in those that stuck with me? And why did some others not? And all of this fascination ultimately led me to doing a neurolinguistic programming practitioner course, where I really learned about how the brain takes on information and and the influence within that. And I'm going to share some of the learnings. This was a course that I did quite a while ago, but then of course I practiced some of the techniques that really resonated, and that's what I'm going to be sharing with you today. And this is like such a massive topic about public speaking. And I only have 30 minutes today, so I had to really kind of condense these into what do I really think will really resonate to give you some practical tools and tips to take away straight from today. So these are my 4 little gems, my 4 diamonds for you today. So the first one that we're going to be taking a look at is the structure of your presentation. The next thing, all around stories, your voice and body language, and finally about how to prepare yourself to speak. So let's dig in to this first one, structuring your presentation. Presentations that have structure to them, the person listening to that is 40% more likely to retain the information from a structured presentation than a wing it presentation. So my first hack for you today is to consider your structure, because my gosh, you've already increased it by 40% just by considering that. So there's lots of different ways that you can structure a presentation, and I've put one of my favorite articles on Dojo for you already to take a look at afterwards. If you search, I think, 7 most popular structures of presentation, it will give you those different 7 structures, and it will also give you links to TED Talks or YouTube videos so that you can see them in action to see which one resonates with you. But the one that resonates with me the most is this one, which is called the hook, meet, and payoff. And within the hook of this, you start with something that really engages your audience. So I didn't start with, hi, my name is Jenny, I'm from Sumo, and I've been with Sumo for this many years, and blah, 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 blah. I didn't do any of that. I started with some rhetorical questions. It's one of my favorite ways. So hack number 2 for you is starting with some rhetorical questions. And the reason for that is that you're not expecting anyone to answer, but your brain has already answered those questions. So whether or not you're actually engaged with anything that I was about to say, your mind is already, because you've asked the brain a question and it wants to answer it, even though they were rhetorical. I said, what if I could help to minimize some of those thoughts? And your brain went, yes, please. For anyone that was here in the talk for imposter syndrome with Lee, he took it a step further by getting people to raise hands. Who here? I don't know if you did this, but that's another technique. If you put your hand up, people, it's like Simon Says, everybody else does it as well. Who here feels this way? You see it in church all the time. How do you feel like this? You see it all the time. So that's another one. If you really want to go, I'm not quite that confident, but you know, that's what he was doing yesterday. So that's your hook. You've brought something in. So rhetorical questions are my favorite. You could make bold statements or you could make surprising facts. You start that off. That's your opener for that. And then you want to go into the meat of your structure of your presentation. And this is a very defined step-by-step. So the audience knows exactly where they are throughout your presentation. So you know that we've got 4 diamonds. You know right now that we're on diamond number 1, structure of presentation. You know exactly where you're at. You know that we've got another 3 to come because we're in the meat of this. part of it. And then finally, the payoff. So at the end of your presentation, you have given a gift to the person, to the people in the audience. You've given a gift of shared experiences, of knowledge, of ideas that you've got. You want to hand that over, and you want to give a call to action. Here's the gift. What are you going to do with it? And it's thinking about, what do you want your audience to go away and do with that gift? What's the payoff at the end? But to help you with then thinking about, okay, so there's a structure, but what about the content within that meat of it is first of all, to help thinking about these key questions. So who is your audience? What do they care about? What problem are you helping them solve? And how will what you have to say help them? Answer these questions, keeping them at the top of your mind, and sense check that with someone else. Here's what I think the audience is. What do you reckon? That's just what I did. The presenters here today got the opportunity to have a coach beforehand, and I took that opportunity, and I said to her, this is what I'm thinking. Like, you've spoken to some of the other speakers. Do you think this is right? You know a little bit about it? And she's like, yeah, I think you're on the right track. Could have been anyone. Could have been someone on my team, my manager, just checking in. Once you have that, then keep that in mind. Write it on a piece of paper, put it wherever, write it on your wall, so that you have it at the forefront of your mind when you're then writing the presentation, to make sure that you're hitting actually who is the audience and what do they really care about. Is what you've got to say going to help with that? And then we can go into then the structure. So I kind of figured, okay, you're an audience that wants to know more about public speaking. Maybe you've got some information that you're wanting to share. Maybe you're kind of just on the beginning steps of this journey. Kind of feel like you're going to want to have some things, you're going to have some notes that you can go and take away and you can put practically. So I wanted to make this as practical tips as I could possibly make it, not theoretical, but practical. And that's what I'm trying to give to you today. So we know now we've got our structure. This is the meat of it. And then within each of those steps, you can break it down further into thinking about supporting materials. Because it's not enough for me to say, so it's a really good idea to structure your presentation. That's number one. Great. Number two, you'd be like, give me something around that. So that something around it could be facts, could be stories, could be examples, could be ideas. So this is going to look a little bit robotic, but it's the structure of it. And this is my favorite way to do this. I've got my overarching message, public speaking hacks. I've got now my 4 key points, my 4 gems. I'm now going to step that down into the 3 supporting materials. So we're in gem number 1, tips for structuring. I started by giving you a fact. 40% is more retained by having a structured presentation. Your mind's like, better listen to this point. That makes a bit of sense. I then gave you the example saying, so this is the example of how I'm structuring this presentation right now with my 4 key gems. Okay, you can see that as an example. And then I gave you the idea to say, but it'd be good also to ask yourself some questions beforehand and get that sense checked. It's pretty simple when you start breaking it down. And I do this for every kind of big presentation that I'm doing. Keep it on track, really know what I'm going to say, and keeping that those questions at the forefront, at the top of it. So that's it. Hack number 1, diamond number 1, structuring your presentation. But what about stories? So we all know and love fables that have been passed down from generation to generation to generation. Stories override data. People will remember stories far more than they will remember facts and figures. That's just like how we are. Story, we all know the rabbit and the hare, and all, they have been around for years. And one of the things that I learned on this neuro-linguistic programming course was really interesting and was something that stuck with me because the guy did it every single day for the time of the course, is that he would start with a story and then he'd cut it off. And you wouldn't hear the end of that story until the end of the day. And halfway through the course, why does he do this? Every single day he'd pull up his chair, he'd sit down on it, and he'd say, something about like some personal story. something he'd heard in the news. And then he'd pull the chair away. At just the moment, you'd be like, what? And then you'd hear the rest of it at the end of the day. What was going on here? So halfway through, he gave us the magic behind it. And he said, think about when you're giving a pitch, a presentation, whatever it might be, some kind of personal story or something that you've seen in the news. And for me, I find it easier to think about personal stories. Start with that and then cut it off. So I gave you the story of how I gave the presentation about Barbie. You have no idea yet how that presentation went. I told you about the dread, told you that I prepared, told you that my dad told me not to quit. You know that I got there. You don't know if I actually did it. You have no idea. But what's happening now is your unconscious mind is continually searching in my presentation for the answers. So whether you like it or not, your unconscious mind is still engaged with what I've got to say because it is searching for a resolution. But I'm not going to give it you yet. I'm going to give it you at the end of the presentation, and that's my hack number 3. Start with a personal story at the beginning, cut it, and then wrap it at the end, because the unconscious mind will be going crazy searching for answers throughout the rest of it. So that's the hack. Give a personal story as an intro, cut it, and then resolve it at the end. But how about your voice and body language? Well, it might be surprising to know that the non-verbal communication dominates verbal. So what I mean by this is I have spent a long time really considering the words that I'm going to say here today, but actually what you hear is only 7% of that. 38% of what you're taking in is the tone of my voice, and 55% is the body language. And that, I realized, was when I was looking at all these presentations, and the ones that stuck were the ones that were using the body language and the tone of voice. It wasn't actually the words. I could be telling you something incredibly interesting that could change the rest of your life, really. But if I'm not going to say it in a very interesting way, you're really not going to take very much away from it. Whereas I could be saying something that is absolutely rubbish, that will do absolutely nothing for the rest of your time, but it will stay forever. The words only matter 7% of the time. So it's worth considering your tone of voice and your body language. So again, I've put onto Dojo my favorite TED Talk for this, that is called How to Speak So That Others Will Listen. And within that, Julian talks about kind of the richness in your voice. Where are you talking from? Are you talking from your diaphragm, your chest, your throat, how that sounds different, how the ears like to hear different sounds and the way that you present and how it takes that information in. But he also has some practical tips that we're going to try today. So this is where I'm going to ask everybody to stand up. Stand up. I'm not asking anyone to come to the front. Just stand up where you are. Stand up, stand up, stand up. Now, I do this before every presentation, and the people in my team know that I always go off for a quiet moment, and now you're going to find out why. So the first exercise that we do is we raise our hands up, and then you want to drop them down with a big sigh. Let's do that again because it feels lovely. Yes. And then it's as if we are like playing cards when we were little. Do that for me. Yeah, really. Now, can you feel how your mouth feels? All of a sudden, it's feeling different. Actually, I'm feeling a little bit different. Okay, we want to warm up that voice a little bit more. We're going to take some la, 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 la. Do it with me. Don't make me feel it. La, 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 la. Lovely. We're now going to do one that's really going to help the mouth open up. We want to roll our R's. He calls this champagne for the mouth. For me, it's more of a gin and tonic, but ooh, doesn't it feel lovely? And the final one is we want to get the range. So we're going to go up. Ooh-yah. Do it with me here. Ooh-yah. One more time. Ooh-yah. Yes, give yourselves a round of applause. Sit down. Lovely. You can sit down. Thank you. Notice how your face feels now. How you feel. You feel a little bit different. Without doing any of that before you go and present, you're presenting like this because you're nervous and you're kind of starting and everything's going to come up into your throat. First of all, you'd be a bit silly. So actually that helps me because I'm like, actually, it gets rid of some nervous energy. But also it's helping your whole mouth to open up, ready for that tone of voice that is worth it. For 38% of what you're hearing today is actually from that. It's worth spending the 5 minutes on that. It's great that we're working from home because I do it all the time before any important Teams calls, so it's much better. So warm up your voice, it is worth it. But what about body language? We saw before 55% was through body language. So, you know, like I said before, I was the girl at the back. I didn't want anyone to talk. And when I started to talk and I started to have to do it more, I was very, very fast and I would do this a lot. And so and I try and get through as quickly as I could because then if I got through it quickly as I could then just sit down and actually the information had been given, but then I could just kind of sit down and that was that. And I still, when I am really nervous, revert back to that, revert back to this. You'll see, like particularly this hand, just I don't know what goes on, but then it just starts going. And I go really fast. And this is one of the things that I had to practice so much, and it is still uncomfortable for me, and I'm still continuing to practice. But again, this is one of the things that I got taught on this course that I continue to try and refine. And this was around thinking about a very simple exercise to help with this that will then help you with your presentations, is to think about 3 stories. And they don't have to be very long, and you can practice this with people in your project, your friends, those in the pub, your family. Taking 3 stories, and one you want to say really fast with lots of energy and hand movements, and how does that kind of, how does that work? How does that feel, and how does the audience react to that? And then you want to take a second story and you slow it down a little bit. You slow down your pace and you slow down your body language. And finally, your third story you want to make as still as possible with your arm movements and as quiet as you can while still being heard with the tone of your voice. So I'm going to give you an example of this. So my first story is when I was in New Zealand, and I decided it'd be a great idea to go up into a plane and jump straight out of it. So it was starting to be sunset, and off we went up into the plane, and I could see we were going higher and higher and higher and higher, and I had someone like, you know, strapped to my back, and they suddenly opened up the door, and the guy went, 1, 2, 3. I remember going to big school for the first time for a bit of a trial day. And we went to the drama department. And we went up behind the curtain, and they were starting to make all these fake wounds for everybody. And I sat there while they made these fake wounds. I thought, wow, this is cool. If this is what big school is about, I think I can handle this. How wrong I was. My final story is of my wedding day. And I remember standing there only a few meters away from someone who was about to change my life forever. Quiet and still can be just as powerful as big and loud. And when you're thinking about this in your presentation, when you want to think about where do I want that energy and where do I want my key points to be soft yet powerful. So that is my hack for body language. Practice those things and then start to think where you want to weave those in to your presentation. And then finally, preparing to speak. So we've talked a lot about the theory of the structure. We've talked about also preparing yourself physically. But how about preparing yourself mentally? So with this, my favorite go-to is visualization for this. And one of the greatest boxers, Muhammad Ali, did this incredibly well. He would train super hard for the ring physically, but he would also train incredibly hard mentally. And he would start to visualize how he was going to come into the ring. He would visualize how he was going to win and how that would feel, and he would visualize the crowds cheering. And he got himself so ingrained with this that he actually started to think about in which round, making predictions. Which round am I going to win and how am I going to win? So strong was the mental flex that he was using in preparation for that. And visualizations can really help you overcome your nerves when you're thinking about presenting. I'm telling you now, it is a lot more useful to think how well something is going to go rather than how rubbish something is going to go. It absolutely helps your whole feeling mentally and physically. When I went skiing once, I got to the top of the hill and I kept on thinking, my skis are going to cross every single day. Guess what? My skis crossed. I twisted my ankle, I was in hospital, I didn't get to ski for the rest of the week. Perhaps a different visualization at the top of the mountain might have helped me out on that occasion. Coming here today, felt sick, felt nervous, I couldn't eat lunch, I ate it without being hungry. All of those things don't go away. But I spend that time thinking about the first 30 seconds. Practice, 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 the whole thing, but in particular, I visualize the first 30 seconds. How will I say it? Who will I look at? Where will I be? How will they look at me? What's the most helpful visualization in all of that going to be? And that will really set you up, ready to give the rest of your presentation. At that event, I walked up onto the stage. And I delivered my talk about Barbie. I didn't throw up. I got through it. I remembered most of what I wanted to say. I even looked up occasionally at people as well. And at the end of the talk, there was this short pause, and then suddenly, this applause. And for the first time, the girl at the back that didn't want to be heard and didn't want to share her learnings was heard. And actually, it had been resonated. Some of the stuff had resonated with people. And I stand here today now at the front saying, I've got something to say, I'll share. And I did a chat with Mark Washbrook, sitting right there in the center, that's on Dojo. When we talked, there was something that Mark said that really resonated with me. He talked about the astronomer, Chris Hadfield, that had gone up in the space station and had taken photos while he was up there, amazing photos while he was up in the space station. And while he was up there, he then came down and he had a choice to make. He could either put those photos in his pocket and go home and smile, or could share those photos with the rest of the world to inspire. And he said, we all have experiences and learnings and gifts that we have to give. And we all have a choice to make. Do we put those things in our pocket, or do we take them out to share and inspire? Sitting here today, you all have gifts of experiences, of learnings, of way to support and help other people, more than you can possibly imagine here right now. It's how we move on as species, is through that learning when we share it. And it is my absolute belief that by sharing those learnings, we can change for the better individuals, our projects, even our organizations, when we step out and when we speak in ways with structure and stories and voice and body language and mentally prepared, so that others really want to listen to us. Thank you. Matt was like, can we pass around the mic? I was like, could you run? So has anyone got any questions? Yes, we'll just wait for the...
Sorry, this is on a bit of a negative note, but how do you deal with something happens wrong in the moment, halfway through a speech, there's like a catastrophe, or the tech all goes wrong, or someone walks out, or God knows what happens. In that very moment, how do you deal with that?
So, do you know the amount of people that have walked out on what I've got to say? Like, heartbreaking. And do you know what? You build a resilience to it. I've tripped over. I've not had things work. I've forgotten slides in between times, and you're like, oh yeah, there's that one as well. I think, first of all, learning to laugh at yourself, not taking it too seriously. The majority of the people are with you. That person also might have walked out for all sorts of reasons. They might not be in a good mental space. They might need the toilet. They might just want to drink. They might need a headache tablet. Your mind is like, that was rubbish. People are leaving. Oh my God, what am I going to do about this? Actually, it could be for all sorts of, it can be for all sorts of reasons. And I've also found that sometimes when I've gone and chased people and I go, why did you leave? And they're like, oh, I was feeling claustrophobic, I was feeling really hot, whatever it might be. But also, some people might just leave because actually it didn't resonate, and that's okay. Not everything that I've said today will have resonated with everybody. Hopefully, most people will have taken something from it, and that's kind of okay as well. Not all the games that we create resonate with everybody, but if it resonates with enough people, that's good.
Thanks. Hello. Oh, I've forgotten what I was going to say.
Happens to me a lot.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So how do you make it, have you scripted this? How do you make it sound natural?
So practice. I can tell you that this is 5,000 words. So yeah, it took about 2 days to write. And during the second day, I kept practicing, tweaking, thinking, tweaking again. I go on walks, I think about it. It's great that we've got lots of spaces to walk around here. I was up until 1:45 last night, practicing. Looks natural. I'm not a natural. I'm not a wing it person. It's practice.
Thank you very much.
Hello. I've got 2 questions, if that's okay. You don't read your slides when you're talking. Do you memorize what you're saying, or do you write a script and then memorize that, or? Yeah.
So for me, I know that there are people that can see, that look at bullet points, and that's what I did with the Barbie talk. I had bullet points. What I found was, and I did that a couple of times since, because that's what you do, you have bullet points. I found that the words would just jump around because I was so nervous, and also I was so nervous that I'd be shaking as well, and I found that that was then putting me off even more. So for me, my coping mechanism is to write it as a script and then learn it as a script. Now, it's probably not every single word within that has been conveyed today, but that's how, for me, I'm able to process that, memorize that, a bit like a song, you know? You kind of get the lyrics, and then you keep on singing the song until you know the lyrics. It's a bit like that.
My other question was, can those techniques be applied to more mundane sort of presentations, like, I don't know, if you're doing a presentation about numbers or Excel sheets or whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. So everything that I do is scripted. I mean, the team laugh at me because it's literally, if I'm doing a workshop, it's literally scripted. Hi, I'm Jenny. Every single thing is pause. Everything is scripted. Even when I'm thinking about a more important meeting, I block out kind of some time beforehand to really think about those key messages. who is the audience, what do they care about, what have I got to say that's going to help them, keeping them at the forefront, and thinking about what is it that I'm going to say, not necessarily scripting everything out in that position, because if it's like a 15-minute meeting, but I still do it for that, and I still practice that first 30 seconds for at least 5 minutes before I go into the meeting.
Thank you.
Do you have any specific advice for presentations over like Teams or video calls where you don't have the kind of body language?
Yeah, so you can still use the tone of your voice, and you can still slow it down and speed it up. So, you know, you've still got this going on. You can still see body language. So within Teams, you can still be saying, so what we're going to be doing is da-da-da-da, and then when you want to really get your key points over, you can still bring it down, this to this. I also invested in a stand-up, workstation, because I find that I'm more confident when I stand up. So for meetings that are more important, I can then stand up for, and for more relaxed meetings, I can sit down. That helps me move about with body language as well.
Hi. Brilliant talk, wonderful, absolutely, really thoroughly enjoyed it. So obviously you talked about the journey that you've come on from not enjoying it to being scared to where you are today. And, you know, I think you're so engaging as a speaker that it's so difficult to not enjoy it from where we're sat. And you talked about, you know, still being nervous as you walked in and all the preparation. When you get up there, do you enjoy it? Can it be an enjoyable experience if you get all these steps right?
Yes, it can. So, yeah, and do you know what? Speaking to lots of the speakers today, they said the first couple of minutes, they were like, could you tell I was nervous? I was like, before. And some you could and some you couldn't. They hit it really well. And then all of them said, I really enjoyed that. I'm really glad I did that. All of them before today was like, I don't know why I've signed up for this. I don't know why I've signed up for this. I don't know why I've signed up for this. Every single person has said, I really enjoyed that. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. Or thanks for reaching out, or et cetera, et cetera. So absolutely can. And every single time there's growth. There's things that I've done today that I'm like, I'd do that differently next time. I continue in this journey of growth within that, and I think that's also the enjoyment within it is also the growth that you can experience through that as well. But yeah.
When you are practicing before your talk, do you sometimes practice before live audience, or is it all in the head, visualizing stuff?
So I've done both. For this one, no, I didn't. I think because it was very personal. So no, I just practiced in front of the mirror. I thought, no, that's not a good way to do that. I'll do that differently. I did a talk at Develop last July, and there I did practice with some different audiences because I wanted to see if it hit the right note for my first time speaking at a game dev conference. That was super scary. So I did do that. So it sort of depends. My natural stance is to do it myself because I feel really silly, and then it's like, well, now it's too late. But I think that's also part of my growth story with that.
Sorry, hi again. So how do you make sure you don't strain your voice from talking so much? And another one that's kind of similar, how do you make sure you don't say words such as, you know, or like, or along the way, and like mitigate as much, fluff as possible? Yeah.
There's probably something that I said throughout it that you said like amazing about 3 million times. Like, I think everybody has that kind of thing that they say. So first of all, that YouTube clip does talk about kind of exercises for bringing it down. And so one of the things is when we're nervous, we particularly talk in our throat, and that's where that can tire incredibly quickly. And also when we're talking up here, actually, it does sound quite nerve-wracking as well, because you're up here and it's quite squeaky. But that's where we tend to talk from when we're nervous. So it's taking in, where you can, like 4 breaths in, and 6 breaths out, that already will start to calm you as much as possible. And then where you can, start thinking about, okay, you can feel it when you're starting to talk into your chest, and you can feel it when you start talking into your diaphragm. So actually your diaphragm will expand while you're breathing, but of course when you're nervous, you start speaking and breathing from here. So again, it's breathing deeply down here. So do like the yoga that is offered to all of SEMO. I definitely recommend for all of this. You'll start to breathe through your diaphragm, and using those techniques really helps you to even get lower. Once you get lower, you start to ground, your whole body starts to ground itself, and then you don't tire as easily. There was a second question in that, sorry.
Yeah, it was about saying things like and the little quirks, how to minimize them, because obviously when you're nervous, you automatically start to say and
Yeah. And I think it still comes down to practice. Like we were saying before, did you script this? So I scripted that, and then this is where I'm off script. Can you see how many are going to fall into this now? That you start to know what you're going to say. In terms of then those questions and answers, it was actually a tip that I was given for interview practice, was to always take a breath, which I'm really bad at. I'm still, again, on a growth journey with this, is to take a breath before every answer. And actually, this was in an interview, so that if you didn't know the answer, it wouldn't seem strange that you were taking a breath, because the answers that you did know, you'd already taken a breath. But I think that breath also stops some of that, because that's what we naturally. So what I think I would do is, you just taking that breath gives your mind the time to speed up to get to where you want to.
Thanks.
You're so glad that I said this.
Need some deep breathing now. Thank you. Great presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
Any advice when you had to talk about bad things or difficult stuff? Because obviously it changed everything, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So I think, again, it's thinking about who is your audience, what do they care about, and what will you say? What is what you're going to say going to help them? So when thinking about delivering bad news, it's also the why behind that. Why is that needed? You're probably not going to be all excited about it. So what we're going to do is change everything that we've done. We're going down this road now, surprise. But really taking in that medium tone and that slower tone, allowing that time for it to be processed, but for you to really understand the why behind it, and for you to be able to get behind that. Because if you don't know that people will see through it. So when it is that, it's thinking, okay, so my team really care about this direction or this feature, and we're having to drop it or whatever that might be for X, Y, and Z reason. So what's the good within that? What's the why behind that? And what are the things that I can really get them behind with my voice and my body language to say, but I'm here for you. I know things are going to change. I know that we're going to go through a bit of a transition, but I'm here with you. These are the reasons why.
Do you have any tips for if you're like going to schools delivering talks towards a much younger audience than you might normally do?
Yeah. So I think an audience is still an audience, and it's still who are they and what do they care about. And if you can try and find that out from the school as early as possible, then what you're going to deliver will hit the note with them. So that's like my top tip for that, is just really understand from the school, okay, they've asked you to come. Why is that? Probably to give a career development talk or something about kind of what it is to be a part of the video games. Why? Why do they care about that? What's currently going on? Can the teachers give you any insight so that when you're doing that, you can help with that?
Yeah, it was for like the head partnership thing. So it's kind of like a pre-prepared workshop.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if there's anything, if you're if there's anything you'd change, or if you make any deliberate kind of, if like talking to much younger people, if there's anything you change about how you present things?
For me, no, I wouldn't necessarily change what I was going to present, but I think I would probably ask more questions, because there's a curiosity there. Actually, for the head partnership, for example, they've come forward to be part of it. So asking them, what are you currently playing? What do you know about video games? What excites you about that? What are some of the questions that you've come here to get answered? because they're an audience that are like hungry to learn. So whilst you have that, asking as many questions so that then you can tailor what you're going to say around that, it can be helpful.
Thank you.
I think Matt's just gone. So that is now time, but thank you ever so much. Again, if you want any more, just reach me out on Teams.